Protesters in Hong Kong have gathered outside the U.S. consulate, calling on President Donald Trump to, quote, liberate the Chinese-ruled city. Police stood by as protesters waved U.S. flags and placards appealing for Washington's aid. The demonstrators called for democratic reforms after another night of violent protests. The unrest has gripped the city for months. The protests were triggered by a controversial extradition bill that would have allowed criminal suspects to be sent to mainland China for trial. Last week, Hong Kong's government officially withdrew the bill, but that failed to appease the demonstrators. China has repeatedly denounced the protests, accusing the U.S. and Britain of stirring up the unrest. Now let's get some insight on this from Ontario. I'm now joined by Jason Unruhe, political commentator and analyst. Good to have you with us, Jason. I mean, what is this? Some of the protesters in Hong Kong asking Washington to go to their help?
Well, it's very interesting that you would reach out to another country to help in a domestic affair. If this were simply a straight human rights issue like a disaster or a famine or, some kind of natural disaster would make sense. But in this situation, these protesters are reaching out to a country that is a sworn enemy of China, what is a sworn enemy of even Hong Kong for the most part, as it is a part of China. It's very interesting that they would reach out to the primary imperialist power in the world, and I think that certainly speaks volumes about what the motives of these essentially separatists. They claim that many of them claim not to be separatists, but they certainly are, and some are honest about it. But they're reaching out to a foreign power, one that's in hostilities with China, is currently engaged in a trade war, also jockeying for resources inside the South China Sea, etc. They're reaching out to an enemy of China to essentially try to drag them further into this situation, which would only make things worse. I mean, right now the U.S. is putting a great deal of effort into funding, training, and helping carry out these protests against the mainland China inside of Hong Kong. This is part of a larger destabilization effort to sow domestic chaos inside the country in order to undermine the Chinese state and the Chinese society in general. And the fact that they so openly would call for the United States to come in and essentially make things worse for China certainly shows that the protesters are not hiding their links to the United States anymore. Previously, they had denied it until they were all photographed together, standing in the same room. People from the National Endowment for Democracy, and if my memory serves me correctly, the U.S. State Department and the leaders of the Hong Kong protests were there. So they are very clearly, openly, not just collaborating with a foreign power, but now they are publicly calling for that foreign power to come in and interfere in what is completely and very obviously a domestic dispute within Chinese territory where other countries simply do not belong.
And maybe this way the U.S. will have, may think it has an open hand to do anything because it's on the request of the people in Hong Kong. Thank you for that. Jason Unruhe, political commentator, analyst, joining us from Ontario.